Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. Major League Baseball's opening day is just around the corner, and I can't wait. The crack of the bat, the pop of the ball hitting a mitt, the green of the grass. It's the sign that springtime is finally here in the Northern Hemisphere. Here's hoping this season will be a banner one for the Baltimore Orioles because, of course, we haven't been to the World Series since 1983 when I was only 5 years old. But opening day isn't the only big news in the American sports world. The men's and women's NCAA basketball tournaments have just begun. Personally, I think this first 4-day opening weekend is the best television sporting event there is. Games on different channels, which little schools are going to upset one of the big dogs, who are these players that don't get much publicity but are really, really good. It's awesome. Here's hoping there are at least 3 or 4 Cinderellas in both the men's and women's fields that are still alive for the Sweet 16 next weekend. But that's enough of Aaron's sports report for today. Let's get into the show. We start today with a listener question. Today's email comes from Robin, who asks, if Darth Sidious has his own life outside Emperor Palpatine, does he have 2 different handwritings to fool his minions? Well, thank you very much for the question, Robin. It's honestly something I've never thought about. Does Palpatine use 2 different handwriting styles between his public politician persona and the Dark Lord of the Sith persona? Robin, I'm going to dodge your question just a little bit because we don't really see people write things down in Star Wars as a whole. Everything seems to be digital, so I don't know if Palpy uses 2 different writing styles because we don't see him ever even use one. But hypothetically, I will say no, because even if he had to write a few things down or sign his name when he was a senator or chancellor, he doesn't really have to write anything down when he's Darth Sidious. And even if he did, would any of his followers have the chance to compare 2 writing styles? I don't think so. The only one I think that would even have the tiniest bit of a chance would be Count Dooku, but I just can't think of a situation where it would come up. Thanks again for the question, Robin. Listeners, if any of you would like to ask a question, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Blue Sky, Instagram, or Twitter at swlegendslounge. And if you would like to get your voice on the show, you can record a short message and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. Now it's time for today's show. I will be talking about the trade paperback comics for Dark Empire 2, and Empire's Edge. Now, listener, I know a few weeks ago I promised that I would have someone else on the show to talk about these comics with me. Well, I did everything I could. I emailed some of the regulars that I have here on the show. I sent messages out on various social media platforms, Twitter, Blue Sky. I even made a video on Instagram asking anyone who would like to talk about these comics to come on the show. And I didn't get anyone who said they would like to talk about these comics. So, you're stuck with me. But anyway, I will try to be as fair as I can. Got it? All right, listener, let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Dark Empire was written by Tom Veitch with artwork by Cam Kennedy and lettering by Todd Klein. The story begins immediately after the death of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Finally, the Galactic Civil War is over. The Empire has been defeated. But no. The surviving members of the Imperial Ruling Council rally their remaining forces and attack Coruscant, forcing the New Republic government to flee the Coruscant system. The war on the planet's surface is chaotic. New Republic forces battle several different Imperial groups who are also fighting with each other to figure out who is going to lead the new Empire. Now, Luke Skywalker and Lando Calrissian lead a battle group to reinforce the remaining New Republic troops, but their lead Star Destroyer is hit and is forced to crash land on Coruscant's surface. Han and Leia jump into the system in the Millennium Falcon to search for Luke and Lando. They zoom through the orbital battle and make their way down into the atmosphere. Eventually, they do find the Republic forces. But when Leia tries to tell Luke and Lando that the New Republic government wants them to pull out also, Luke refuses. He says he feels something in the Force, something evil, and it's coming. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an enormous force storm appears and sweeps through the Coruscant system, engulfing any ships and shrapnel that's in its path. The storm snakes its way down onto the planet's surface, inhaling troops and battle vehicles. Luke orders Leia, Han, and Lando to go, and they do. They escape in the Falcon just in time. Then the Jedi turns and faces the vortex. The storm washes over Luke, and he disappears. With Luke gone and the New Republic government on the run, Imperial forces push their advantage. They employ a new superweapon, World Devastators, engines of destruction as big as a city that devour wide swaths of a planet's surface, turning the resources into machines of war. The Empire sends the World Devastators to Mon Calamari. They begin sucking up parts of the oceans and the great floating cities, sending all the material to the immense factories inside. Meanwhile, Luke is taken too deep into the galactic core to the planet Biss, a planet shrouded in dark side energy. Luke is drawn to the power emanating from a dark citadel. He ventures inside and finds Emperor Palpatine. Luke is stunned. "I saw you die," he says. "No," Palpatine says, "I found the secret for eternal life." The Emperor says the dark side of the Force corrupts his body, but he's learned how to transfer his essence to another, and he has an endless supply of clones to use. Palpatine offers to teach Luke the secrets of the dark side, and amazingly, Luke agrees. Mon Mothma sends Han and Leia on a mission to rescue Luke, but Han says they'll need help getting past the Imperial patrols surrounding Biss. Now, who are the best people for this kind of job? Smugglers, of course. So they head to Nar Shaddaa and meet with two of Han's old friends, Shug Ninx and Sala Zend. While they come up with a plan to smuggle Han and Leia onto Biss, Leia gets a feeling through the Force. She and Han head through the bowels of the capital city and find an elderly homeless woman, a former Jedi named Vima Dabota. The old woman hands Leia a lightsaber. She begins to tell Leia how she escaped the Great Purge when Boba Fett appears. The bounty hunter tries to kill Han and Leia, but the Solos escape and make their way back to Shug's garage. The smugglers load up the Falcon and blast off to the galactic core. When they arrive on Biss, Palpatine allows Leia to enter the Citadel. The Emperor tells Leia how he will soon enter a new body. Normally, that would be another clone. But what's even better would be the unborn child that Leia is carrying. Of course, Leia tells Palpatine she'll never allow him to take her son. She appeals to Luke to remember the good inside of him and helps Luke turn away from Palpatine's influence. Luke gives Han and Leia the command codes for the World Devastators and allows them to escape. The Solos broadcast the codes when they return to New Republic space, shutting down the immense superweapons and allowing Republic troops to round up Imperial forces. With Leia safely away from the Emperor, Luke begins destroying the remaining clones. But he's not quite quick enough. And Palpatine jumps into one of the few remaining bodies. The new, young Palpatine orders Luke to chase down Leia. He still wants her baby. Luke and Palpatine track Leia to the New Republic headquarters on Pinnacle Moon. They lay siege to the base, threatening to destroy Republic leadership unless Leia surrenders. She agrees and joins Luke on Palpatine's command ship. Once again, the Emperor tells Leia that her unborn child will be strong in the Force, a perfect vessel for his next body. Palpatine unleashes another Force storm, telling Leia that he'll destroy everyone she loves unless she gives him her baby. Again, Leia appeals to Luke to help her defeat Palpatine, to turn away from the dark side, and to protect her children. Finally, Leia's plea reaches her brother. The Skywalker twins join in the Force, and together they call on the light side to push back the Force storm. It changes course, enveloping Palpatine and Imperial forces. The story ends with Luke telling Leia that her children will help bring about a new era of peace and prosperity in the galaxy. The Jedi Knights, Luke says, will rise again. Dark Empire 2 was also written by Tom Veitch, with artwork by Cam Kennedy and lettering by Tom Klein. This story begins a few months following the events of Dark Empire. Luke Skywalker finds the first of his new order, a former fallen Jedi named Cam Solusar. Together, they travel to the planet Ossus, a former Jedi stronghold during the days of the Old Republic long ago. Once there, Luke and Cam find a group of primitive humans called the Isana. Luke says the Isana were descendants of the Jedi that used to live on Ossus thousands of years ago. The Isana can still touch the Force, but they don't really know how to use it. However, Luke discovers two Isana who show a strong presence in the Force, a young woman named Jem and her teenage brother named Rafe. Elsewhere, one of Palpatine's acolytes, a dark Jedi named Cedrus, attacks the planet Balmorra, hoping to draw New Republic forces deeper into the galactic core. But before Cedrus can close the trap, Palpatine orders the Dark Jedi to hunt down Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa Solo. Cedrus tracks Luke to Ossus. He attacks Luke and Cam outside of one of the Isanan villages. But the Isana prove to be fierce warriors, destroying the Imperial forces. Cedrus himself is defeated when an ancient tree, a Jedi Master named Ood, wraps its roots around Cedrus and sacrifices both of them to the light side of the Force. Now that they know that Palpatine is back, the New Republic decides to take the fight to the Imperials. But little do they know, the Emperor has already developed a new superweapon, a galaxy gun. Like the Death Star, the Galaxy Gun can destroy a planet in a single shot. But unlike the Death Star, it doesn't need to travel into a planetary system to do it. The Galaxy Gun can shoot a projectile through hyperspace. All it needs are coordinates, and boom! Gone. Just like Alderaan. Palpatine orders the Galaxy Gun to destroy the New Republic government sanctuary base. It fires, the projectile jumps to hyperspace, and emerges right on top of Pinnacle Moon. Luckily, though, the New Republic had abandoned the base right after learning about the Galaxy Gun. Luke, Cam, and another Jedi named Empatejaios Brand joined the New Republic at their new base on the planet Nespis 8. Together, they began planning an attack on the Imperial capital of Biss, hoping to end Palpatine's reign of terror once and for all. The story ends with Leia giving birth to her third child, a boy, who she names Anakin. As Luke looks at her sister holding her new baby, the Force gives him a vision of an adult Anakin standing with his adult brother and sister, Jacen and Jaina, protecting the galaxy. The final chapter in the Dark Empire saga is called Empire's End. It was also written by Tom Veitch, but for this story, the artwork was done by Jim Bakey with lettering by Lois Buhalas. Emperor Palpatine is getting desperate. His final clone is aging rapidly, and without another body to jump into, his essence may be lost in the Force forever. Palpatine orders the Galaxy Gun to fire on Nespis 8, but when the projectile hits, it doesn't explode. It's a dud. And it allows the New Republic to flee their base before the Empire can reload. Instead of finding another planetary base, the New Republic decides to keep the government moving and jumps the fleet out to the galactic rim. The Emperor travels to the ancient Sith world of Korriban to search for a cure to his rapidly aging body. Palpatine communes with the ghosts of the Sith, demanding their help. But the Sith say the only way to stop the aging process is to find another vessel. Without a new clone, where will I find a host? The Emperor demands. The ghosts show Palpatine a vision of Leia and her newborn son Anakin, and they point him to the location of the New Republic fleet near the planet Onderon. When Palpatine's forces reach Onderon, they find our heroes in the great walled city of Iziz. The Imperials quickly breach the walls, and while Luke and Han lead the New Republic forces, the Emperor, disguised as a lowly pilgrim, sneaks into the city's monastery and finds Leia hiding inside. With his clone body nearly failing, Palpatine reaches for the baby Anakin. He begins to transfer his essence into the newborn, when suddenly Brand jumps between them, shielding the baby. Palpatine's essence enters Brand, but he's no match for a Jedi in his weakened state. The light side and dark sides of the Force collide, and Brand vanishes, taking Palpatine's essence with him. The story ends with Han and Chewie jumping to hyperspace in the Emperor's flagship, heading to Biss. When the enormous vessel returns to real space, it slams into the Galaxy Gun, destroying it. Han and Chewie return to Onderon in the Millennium Falcon to reignite with Luke, Leia, and the Solo children. Time to take a break. When I return, I'll talk more about the Dark Empire saga. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Convergence is the first story in Phase 2 of the High Republic Publishing Initiative. The twin planets of Eiram and Arano have been fighting for generations. When the Jedi sends a delegation to broker a ceasefire, it quickly becomes apparent that the two worlds are merely pawns in someone else's game. Unravel the mystery in Convergence by Zoraida Cordova. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today I'm talking about the Dark Empire saga. The trade paperbacks, Dark Empire 2, and Empire's End, all written by Tom Veitch. At the beginning of the show, I told everyone that I tried to find someone to come on to discuss with me what they like about this story. What are their favorite parts? How did this story help influence their Star Wars fandom? I was not a fan when I first read it in the mid-90s, somewhere around 93, 94, 95, somewhere around there. I read it after Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy. And from talking to a handful of fans who are around my age, who remember those early parts of the Legends timeline that most people consider when Legends really started to get going in the early 90s. Yes, there were some stories in the comics in the 70s and 80s, but when people think about Legends, they really think about the stuff that starts with the Heir to the Empire trilogy in the early 90s. And Dark Empire came out right after that. And I think these two stories are sort of a dividing line between a lot of Legends fans at that time. With the hindsight of 35 years, maybe they didn't need to be a dividing line. But I do understand why many Legends fans at the time chose one side or the other. From my experience, from the people that I have spoken to who experienced the Heir to the Empire trilogy and the Dark Empire saga in real time, I would say the dividing line is about 75-25 for people that were alive then and were experiencing them at that time, who were teenagers, people in their 20s, people in their 30s. Most people preferred Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy. I have read a handful of interviews by Tom Veitch. Sadly, he passed away in 2022. Lucasfilm hired Veitch and Zahn to create their stories at the same time in the late 80s. At one point, Veitch says he reached out to Zahn to make the two stories more connected than what they seem to be. And according to Veitch, Zahn wasn't as amenable to the idea because, in Zahn's estimation, the Star Wars saga is a myth. It's different stories told by different storytellers. The stories change. The storytellers are unreliable. So according to Veitch, in Zahn's estimation, everyone should just tell their own story. Veitch also says that he and Zahn were at one point tasked by Lucasfilm to read the others' stories and give criticism. Veitch's main criticism about Zahn's work, specifically Heir to the Empire, after he read it, is that Veitch did not believe it was cinematic enough for Star Wars. Veitch said that he always believed that Star Wars should be cinematic. No matter what form it's in, no matter what medium, a person should be able to imagine it on a big screen, in the movie theater, with the same awe that they experienced the first scenes of A New Hope, when you see the crawl go up, and then the Tantive 4 and the huge Imperial Star Destroyer go overhead in that shot, when the fans that were in the theater at that time could tell 60 seconds into the film, wow, this is something I've never seen before. And according to Veitch, Zahn took that criticism to heart, and in his estimation, in Veitch's estimation, the subsequent two books, Dark Force Rising and The Last Command, are written more cinematically. Now, on the other side, Veitch says that Zahn's major criticism is that Zahn hated the idea of the Emperor reborn, the Emperor coming back and transferring his essence into a clone body. However, according to Veitch, that was George Lucas's idea. George Lucas suggested that idea to Veitch. I personally, this is just my own opinion, I have never liked the idea of the Emperor transferring his essence into a clone and living beyond the ending of Return of the Jedi. However, regardless of my opinion, that's what happened. That happened in both legends, and it happened in canon. The Emperor transferred his essence in some way, shape, or form into Supreme Leader Snoke, and then again into some sort of clone body that was defeated at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. So this storyline of the Emperor continuing to live after Return of the Jedi that was suggested to Tom Veitch by George Lucas, and that Veitch made the central antagonist of the Dark Empire saga, seems to resonate more with the storyline that continued in canon than the storyline that Zahn came up with in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, at least at this point. Because we do know that Grand Admiral Thrawn has made his way into canon in Rebels, in several canon books, and now in the New Republic era of canon, first beginning with the Ahsoka television show, and perhaps in some sort of New Republic era movie, if that comes to be. To get back to Dark Empire, yes, I have never enjoyed the storyline of Palpatine living beyond Return of the Jedi. However, the part of the story that is my least favorite. The part that really grinds my gears, to quote the great Peter Griffin, is Luke Skywalker deciding that he has to submit to the dark side of the Force to learn its secrets in order to defeat the Emperor's clone and the dark side of the Force from within. From everything we've heard George Lucas talk about, the two sides of the Force, the light side is selflessness, the dark side of the Force is selfishness. One cannot simply dabble in the dark side of the Force, in Lucas's estimation. And I know that while many aspects of Star Wars have branched out from Lucas's original ideals of the saga, one of the things that remains consistent, in my opinion, is the way that the different storytellers describe the way the Force works. It works the way Lucas originally intended it. And one thing that Lucas has said is that you cannot dabble in the dark side of the Force. You have to make a conscious effort to continually reject the dark side of the Force because it's seductive, because it's a quick way to power, because a lot of times it's the easy way to do something. So in my opinion, having Luke Skywalker turn to the dark side to help inflict pain and devastation throughout the galaxy, basically becoming the new Darth Vader, in order to learn the secret powers of the dark side and eventually defeat the Emperor's clone, goes against the way Lucas has always described the light side and dark side of the Force. I don't believe that can happen that way. So that's always been my biggest issue with the Dark Empire series. With the two somewhat competing stories, the Dark Empire saga, Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy, it makes aspects of Legends very messy, in my opinion. There are several authors, both in books and comics, that try to meld the two conflicting stories together. Some of them do a better job than others. In some ways, I wish a couple of the authors would just pick one and ignore the other, regardless of which one they preferred, which one fit their story better. But a lot of times it made it messy. As the Legends storyline continued further along, Luke had to continually make reference to falling to the dark side and then teach his students why someone should not do that, why turning away from the dark side is difficult, but why it's something that a Jedi must strive to do every day. It's almost like maybe Luke should have thought of this before he decided to try to go undercover as basically the Emperor's new right hand. Now, even though I'm not a fan of this saga, let me point out some of the things about the Dark Empire story that fans of it really like. And this is why I wanted to try to find someone else to come on the show, because I wanted to give them the floor to describe what it is about this saga that really works for them. I have heard Mark Hamill say that one of the very early discussions about how Return of the Jedi was going to end, I don't know if it was a story treatment. I don't know if there was ever part of the script, one of the early script drafts that references this, or if it's just a discussion that Hamill had with George Lucas and Rick McCallum. I have no idea. But I have heard and read Mark Hamill say that at one point in time, when Lucas was planning to do episodes 7, 8, and 9, after taking a little bit of time off, that the end of Return of the Jedi was going to end with Luke defeating Vader, defeating the Emperor, killing them, and then Luke donning Vader's mask and becoming the new leader of the Empire. And then 7, 8, and 9, we're going to include Leia and Han. Actually, I think Han may have died in 6, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. But at least Leia in 7, 8, and 9, we're going to try to find Luke's sister, Luke's twin sister. At that point in time, her name was Kira. So, we have Luke taking over as the new Emperor, the new Vader, sort of an amalgamation of the two, and leading the Empire. That's basically what we have here in this story. If that was, in fact, the original thought for the ending of Return of the Jedi, then you kind of have that here. So you could look at the Dark Empire saga, specifically Dark Empire 1, as Lucas's original intention for the original trilogy. And, one of the parts that I don't like with the Emperor living beyond Return of the Jedi and using clone bodies in order to keep himself alive, that also is one thing that Lucas thought about. The selfishness of the dark side. Wanting to remain in power. Wanting to be able to defeat death so you can remain in power. That the Emperor would try to figure out a way to live beyond the body that was being consumed by the dark side of the Force. Star Wars is space fantasy. It's a space opera. It is more fantasy than science fiction. I think you can easily say that the Dark Empire saga is more space fantasy. It leans more toward the way Lucas thought of the Star Wars universe than the way Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy does. In my opinion, that is definitely more science fiction, while the Dark Empire saga is more science fantasy, space fantasy. I would say that while the storyline is not one that I like very much, Veach does capture the underlying essence of the way George Lucas saw the Star Wars saga. And I think he does need to be commended for that. Look, Star Wars is a tremendously large story. It's a huge IP. There are going to be stories that you like and stories you don't like. There are plenty of stories that I like more than others. But just because I don't like a story or you don't like a story doesn't mean that that story goes against the principles of Star Wars that we see in those original trilogy films. The first things that Lucas showed the world. I hope this discussion wasn't too confusing. And even though I'm not a fan of these stories, I hope I at least gave equal time to the reasons that many of you out there who do like the Dark Empire saga, many of those reasons why you like it. If not, let me know. Well, it's time to wrap up. Listener, if you'd like to contact the show, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Blue Sky, Instagram, or Twitter at swlegendslounge. Send me your questions, your comments. If you disagree with something I've said on this show, and believe me, I understand, you may have, let me know. I'll read your opinion on the show. And once again, I'm calling on you to send me your favorite Star Wars character groupings. We have not gotten one of those this year. I think the last one we got was on one of the last shows we did for Legacy of the Force, either in late November or early December last year. So come on, someone send me their favorite Star Wars character grouping, because I love reading those. Now, coming up on the next episode, it's time to find out what's been happening with our favorite X-Wing pilots. That's right. I'm going back to check in with Wedge and Corran and Tycho and Gavin and all the rest of the Rogue Squadron crew in the book X-Wing, Isard's Revenge by Michael A. Stackpole. You can look forward to that episode coming out on April 3rd. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.